I'm Jack O'Brien. I'm the managing editor of MM+M, and I'm pleased to be joined today by two of our friends over at Relevate Health. We're going to be talking about some interesting aspects of the modern medical marketer's playbook, specifically point of learning and point of clinical decision. What those are, how they connect to one another, how they're different, and how they can help you, a medical marketer, lead your clients to the greatest success. I want to first introduce Julie Granberry.
Hey, Jack. Great to be here.
And Zach Shapiro.
Thank you for having us.
Just for the sake of our audience, what are your roles at Relevate Health? Julie, if you want to start us off.
I had strategic growth and have been with the organization for about 16 years.
I've been with the organization for about 3 months,
Woo-hoo!
so very, very close to 16 years. And I'm EVP of Strategic Accounts.
We'll have you back here when you're on for 16 years. It'll be a nice little anniversary.
I look forward to coming back.
We're going to get into a number of different topics here as part of the conversation, but Zach, why don't you start us off in terms of the trends that you're seeing that are allowing medical marketers to really have the most impact on behalf of their pharma clients?
100%. And I think this is a good opportunity to really acknowledge that the playbook around us has changed. I think forever, DTC has been focused on trying to drive awareness, to drive volume in the office, try to get patients to create demand. And on the physician side, we've always been focused on the reach and frequency of our sales force, using peer-to-peer and KOLs to help pull that through a lot to help the sales force, but also to help with key levels of influence. And then you always kind of had digital to the side. And I think when you looked in the COVID world, all of a sudden that emphasis started to go more towards the digital side and digitization. But old habits die hard. And I think as we've kind of come back to this, if you want to call it a post-COVID world, there's that level of reliance on the sales force as really the primary promotional driver hasn't changed a lot in pharma. And I think for us, one of the things that we tend to see a lot is that while that playbook worked for a while, we're now at this point of there's a lot of other things that are happening within the C system on both the patient side as well as the HCP side. And when you start to think about where pharma can influence, we really see there's two main points. We see that there's a point within the point of learning, when an HCP and physician is learning about a brand and learning about a disease state, really making sure that they can relevantly figure out what products make the most sense for better patient outcomes. And then the second component, which is more of that point of clinical decision, when they're in front of a patient, how do I actually pull that through and how do I make sure that I have the right products for the right patient? I'm helping them understand their disease state, manage their therapy, manage their condition.
Yeah, when you think about those two different moments that Zach was just articulating, you'd think, well, how can I capture the clinician's attention? Well, certain moments you don't necessarily want to. We call that a little bit more reactive. So in the point of clinical decision, you've got HCP and a patient together. This is much more so of a reactive state. The clinician there should be focused really in on that patient and their well-being and making the best treatment decisions. So we might put in awareness and really help to drive awareness and consideration through EHR within the workflow there. As soon as that patient is done, the clinician walks right outside. He or she might be scrolling their emails. That goes right back in that point of learning moment. We've kind of coined these phrases just to try to bring some relevancy into what clinicians are going through all on their own in their day-to-day life.
I appreciate that, and it's one of those things that's always interesting is the talk about the white coat moments that obviously physicians have in their day-to-day professional lives, but then you talk about this kind of blue jean moments too of, oh yeah, they watch Netflix just like us, they're on LinkedIn, they're on Instagram, all that sort of stuff. I'm wondering if you can elaborate just a little bit more too about point of learning and point of clinical decision in terms of maybe how they do connect, because there is obviously a little bit of an overlap in that Venn diagram.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's put it into practice. So think about point of learning. Some fun facts and stats. ASCO on a monthly basis pushes out over 1,500 pieces of information. You think about the rep trying to get access, 400 different sales rep interactions per HCP per year. Now let's go on the flip side where that clinician is in the room with the patient. He or she is receiving 25 to 40 different outreaches from a patient within the EMR, follow-up questions to their doctor. And then PCPs are seeing at least 25 patients a day. So you think about all of that inundation. It's a matter of how can we relevantly reach these clinicians with the right information. And then to your point earlier, Jack, how can we connect those moments in time? We like to say that's for the moments that matter. And we do that through relevance and precision. And we have found, and not just us, but some really smart people at ZS Associates, that when you connect this point of clinical decision, this awareness and consideration, to the point of learning, which is much more so of that deeper engagement, it drives greater results to the tune of 2.2 times ROI.
That's really interesting.
And as Julie was talking about how busy physicians are in particular within those 2 points, it's impossible for brands to break through. So she alluded to being very precise and being very relevant with where we reach them, how we reach them, and understanding all of the different touch points and connectivity that they have becomes really important to do. And we've talked about this notion of connected omni-channel journeys forever. And our point of view is that clients always get stuck in kind of the academics of it or within the execution of it. And it's really important to be successful in both point of learning and point of clinical decision making, to be able to pull those two together and really have vendors and partners that can help you along the way orchestrate within those 2 points in time in very, very precise moments.
So I want to pull on the thread there too, because I was talking with an agency person a couple of weeks ago, and they made the point where it's not the creative or how they're actually putting together the messaging or communications that they're trying to get in front of their HCP of choice. It's really about the distribution and being able to get in front of them. And I think it's an interesting thing where it's like, yeah, we have these messages that we know are super effective, that we know are going to be engaging and drive home what we're trying to do for our clients, but it's getting in front of them. Like you said, there's hundreds of thousands of communications that you're trying to parse through.
Totally. And that's really like this notion of relevancy and real life. And so how can you've got the content, you just mentioned it. How do we actually break through in that moment that matters? And that's all about leveraging the data that you should really be relying on your partners for or have in-house, and be able to activate on it in those moments. So we are getting very, very close, if not already there, of one-to-one marketing.
And it's so interesting because whenever you talk to pharma marketers, it's always, we have data, we have data. Everybody has data. The real question is not, do you have data? It's how are you using data to enable a lot of that precision and a lot of that relevance? And for us, we take a lot of the signals that Julie was talking about and really help to pull those through at the right moments in time. Because to your point, agencies, and I've worked in agencies for a long time, agencies have done a really awesome job at figuring out the what. What do we say to people? And we've evolved into where do we say those things to them. I think it's now the how do we actually break through, and how do we know enough context to be confident and to be predictable and to know that what we're going to say in these specific areas, in these two specific moments, become really important. So when we think about the point of learning and the point of clinical decision, there's so many different places that physicians are learning today. They're learning from your sales reps. They're learning from their peers and their thought leaders. They're learning in congresses. They're learning in non-personal. It's really important that you can look at those beyond just isolated tactics and isolated solutions and things, and really start to figure out how does all of that connect together to start to deliver really, really precise ways to break through in those moments. On the flip side, with the point of clinical decisions, if you think about point of care, there's so many interactions that patient and physician have in office. And for us, we recognize that when they're actually together in the room, the EHR becomes a really important potential tool in order to help to facilitate a lot of those clinical decisions and pull that through. And then after that visit, how do you actually start to take that in-office experience and help the patient when they leave the conversation with the doctor? And so that's really been a lot of our focus, and being very data-driven, acknowledging that there's a lot of things that are happening across these two different moments, across various different tactics. But the art of that is really to understand, how do we pull that together? How do we pull the what that agencies do so well more into the how and into that distribution at those points in time?
It's really interesting to hear you talk about, again, all these different touch points that you can have with your HCP target audience of choice, and how you're going to be able to impact that with this messaging strategy. I'm curious too, just in terms of maybe how you are able to evaluate this. I'm sure that's what clients come back and they're like, hey, this all sounds good, but then it's like, we need to be able to see results. We need to be able to make sure that what we're investing here is getting that ROI. Anything like that come to mind?
Course.
Absolutely. So I always tell the team, if you can't measure it in this day and age, it's as if it never happened. And so we are truly measuring every click down to that physician level data, or what you might hear in the industry called PLD. And so understanding these moments that happen in time, whether it's at the right patient within the office with the clinician, we get that data back. And this helps for a variety of reasons. One, we're able to give it back to the brands to help them make better and more informed decisions from their marketing playbooks. the field force members now can have really relevant conversations because they know potential patient was in that office the week prior. And then to your point, Jack, we're able to measure it. So lots of tests and controls and truly being able to do ROIs, lifts on everything that we do. And the goal really, though, is to do more, but in a precise way. So that sounds like very contradictory, but how can we do more and build this relationship, a connected experience for that clinician in a precise way?
And I think for us, one of the things that we find to be so important is in today's day and age in the different partner mix, to make sure that you have partners that are very transparent, that you have partners that are not just focused on impressions and clicks, they're focused on how are we delivering actionable results? How are we really driving business impact for our clients? And I think that's really where you start to see different organizations set apart from the pack, if you will, where if you're very focused on if you understand a client's commercial strategy, and you understand what the brand need is, you understand what the customer needs are and the gap there, you then marry that with data and precision to be able to break through, along with predictability and guaranteed engagement leading to ROI impact. That's really the winning recipe for the future.
I think there's a very innovative approach to this kind of big data ecosystem that everyone's existing in now. But when it comes to some of these larger trends that you're seeing in the industry writ large, do any stand out to you?
Yeah, for sure. When I think about driving deeper engagement, that's something that is becoming industry standard and the expectation now. And was just talking to a media partner just a few weeks ago, and they said, the brand is asking us to figure out how do we drive deeper engagement, which can be really challenging, especially if they're expecting it to be in market relatively fast. There's a lot of solutions that we can deploy that drive a little bit deeper engagement and drive that point of learning, things like interactive quizzes or gaming that really help increase that engagement and are still relatively fast to market. I really think this is becoming the expectation. And one of the things that I also recently heard is EHR adjacent. You know, it used to be where EHR was the table stakes. Now it's, well, what's next? So how can we connect that point of EHR, this moment in time happened, to drive a little bit deeper engagement? Let's do an interactive quiz and then move from there, leveraging that data and that precision.
And we're actually having a lot of success doing that with clients. There's one client that we won't name, but there's a client that we're working with in the depression space. And what we did on our end was deployed 4 solutions. We focused in EHR, so that way when a doctor is in front of a patient, we can actually not only serve them a message, but use that signal to then trigger an email off of that. So that way you're having some type of contextual relevance directly to the physician, and you know exactly they saw this patient at this time. And then from there, we were also able to execute some of the quizzes that Julie was talking about. So all of a sudden, we're able to gather a lot of information around what the physician thinks about the brand, what they think about the disease state, where there's knowledge gaps. And even in a mature disease state like depression, there's still a ton of knowledge gaps, and there's a ton of innovation that's starting to happen within that area. And then we actually went a step further in the point of learning of starting to pull that through in more of a localized way, so you can start to think about different incidence rates in different zip codes and starting to think about different patient populations. And what was really cool about that is each step along the way for us in our small universe, we were able to take learnings and kind of connect and trigger the next part of the communication based on what an individual physician knows. But what was really cool was the pharma use case. They were able to take that data that they're getting from us on a weekly basis, and they were able to use it for 2 reasons, or 2 areas. The first is they were able to start to figure out, where do I have white space within my sales reps, and when do I start figuring out when I really have to nudge a rep to go talk to a physician? This was perfect because we were getting the data from when they're actually in front of a patient, from when they're being exposed and answering questions and quizzes, and we're able to feed that back to pharma and say, hey, look, here's an opportunity, go call on this physician. And we're even able to take insights based on what they engaged with within the quiz at an individual level, and even within more of that regional data, and we're able to feed that back. So now the rep doesn't even knows I have to go talk to this person, but now they know what their current knowledge state is. They know some of the information that the physician is interested on a localized level, so they can start to tailor their programming and their conversations leveraging that data. And that's really, the more mature we start to see organizations become, that's really where we see the opportunity for vendors and pharma to work closer together in more of, let's use the data and the solutions together, connect them, and so everybody benefits, because at the end of the day, it's the experience that the customer sees.
And it's one of those things too that, like, as I've talked with agencies more, I'd say over the past like year, 18 months, there has been that transition and conversation about how do we're not just agencies and you're not just our clients. It's like, how do we have this really strategic business partnership between the two? And that kind of aligns with what you're talking about, where it's like, hey, if we're getting something out of it, you're getting something out of it, and it keeps this kind of robust process going forward, who says no?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of emphasis on that. I mean, I worked in the agency space for a long time, and one of the amazing things that used to make me pull my hair out, at least, was there was a lot of academic thinking about how do you go about doing this. And there's so many different types of customers. There's so many different segments and micro segments and needs and barriers. And then you layer in geography, you layer in formulary coverage. And so you build these very sophisticated maps around trying to figure out, how do I reach customers? And then when you ask the question of how do you pull that through, well, I don't know, because the data's in a lot of different places, and it's really hard for us to control that. So I think, to exactly your point, Jack, the more strategic relationships that pharma can make with other partners that can start to bring this together, I think that's where you're going to start to see things propel, and you already have in today's world. Well, at least we're already seeing it in today's world.
Yeah, and you think about, too, the sophistication that you just talked about and losing your hair over it. You want to make sure that these moments in time that we're capturing are truly precise and personalized, but in a way so that it's not so complicated that it looks beautiful on paper, but really is hard to activate in real life. So you want to make sure that you're looking for partners who can give you the insights, help you trigger on that signal, and truly activate and measure it, would be my advice.
It's been great having you both here. I want to ask a two-part question, one for each of you before we wrap. And Julie, I'm going to start off with you in terms of the lexicon gap. And I think that might be new for some members of our audience, but when you're working with your target HCP audience, I know there can be a lot of terms and phrases and just a knowledge understanding of like, where are we coming from? Where are they coming from? Talk a little bit about that lexicon gap and why it's important to address it.
Sure. I mean, oftentimes when you're hearing the word lexicon gap, you're probably thinking about clinician and patient in that room together, and boy, is there a gap there.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're really just discussing at this point in time is there is a lexicon gap with marketing. Gone are the days of really having these isolated tactics or channels, right? You have, oh, what am I doing for non-personal? What am I going to do for peer-to-peer? How do I have all of these things? Brands that are succeeding are having these connected experiences with these HCPs. So that's why we're trying to circulate this nomenclature or lexicon of point of clinical decision, the time where the physician is with the patient, and this point of learning, this intentionality of learning, whether that's opening an email or going to a congress. And the brands that are winning are those that are creating those seamless experiences that connect point of clinical decision and point of learning.
And what's so funny is, in an industry as small, and I'm going to say incestuous, as pharmaceutical marketing, you kind of need a thesaurus to go into every different client and every different partner that you talk to. I'm sure your job, you hear 100 different buzzwords.
Plenty of them.
And so I think for us, like, that's where this notion of lexicon becomes so important. And, you know, a win from Relevate Health standpoint is to really coin point of learning and point of clinical decision as the wrapper across these two really critical influence points with physicians.
And Zach, I had one final question for you to take us home, which is when you're looking at the focus on awareness plays that a lot of clients have, there is an understanding of like, oh yeah, there is a value here and I totally get why you do it, but like, is there too much of tipping the scale in that way? I'm curious if you have any thoughts in this desire to maybe pivot off of that and look at other areas from a marketing perspective.
It's interesting because I think, you know, over time there were, and when you're in this industry as long as we have been, and I'm not sure if the grades show on camera, but my wife tells me that they do. So, you know, you started to go towards this world of when digital launched, it was trying to value the impression. And then for so long, you started to get a bunch of different measurement methodologies, started to put value and weight on that. And what you're starting to see from an investment standpoint is the funnels have really started to widen up top, and that's where the majority of the investment is really happening. And it's our belief, the more we talk to clients, the more that we have conversations, and Julie alluded to it earlier, it's our belief that we have to move clients down the funnel to more of those mid and bottom funnels. And, you know, we don't believe the funnel is dead. I know there's lots of let
it be known.
Let it be known. But we do believe that there's opportunity to really shift from more of that awareness to more of that engagement focused type of media. And one of the big reasons why that doesn't happen is because that takes a lot of time and effort for pharma to manage 100 different vendors that each touch, to Julie's point, a peer-to-peer component, a non-personal component. And one of the things that we encourage clients to do is to actually work with partners, including the likes of ourselves, that have solutions across the entirety of the funnel. And the reason for it is, one, we're able to connect a lot of these components, but two, it also streamlines how many people and how many things for clients and for pharma to be able to manage. And it also streamlines your MRL processes because you're working with one known partner who eventually knows your processes, and getting it to market obviously is our end goal. So those are some of the big things that we're starting to see just in terms of where the dollars are placed and how we go about actually making change.
Zach, Julie, it's been wonderful having you on this show here, and I've learned a lot just in terms of what you're talking about, the point of learning, the point of clinical decision making. I know that our audience has as well, so I really appreciate you coming on here and talking about all these trends that you're seeing. Look forward to having you on the show again to talk about whatever sorts of advancements you're putting into place for your clients.
That'd be awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.